When the first season of Nobody Wants This arrived on Netflix in 2024, it felt like a breath of fresh air in the romantic comedy genre. The show, created by Erin Foster and starring Kristen Bell and Brody, followed the unlikely relationship between Joanne, an outspoken agnostic podcaster, and Noah, a young rabbi navigating both faith and modern relationships. Season 1 worked because it was charming, awkward, witty, and grounded. The chemistry between Bell and Brody felt genuine. Their conversations felt natural. The cultural and emotional differences between their characters created real tension that actually mattered. It was a romantic comedy about two adults who had lived a little, been through heartbreak, and were trying to find out whether love could bridge their differences. But Season 2? Well, Season 2 feels like something completely different, and unfortunately not in a good way. The biggest issue with Season 2 is that it feels like the show has lost the very thing that made Season 1 so special: its heart. Season 1 treated its characters like real people. The awkwardness of falling in love felt believable, the dialogue felt spontaneous, the emotional beats were earned. Season 2, on the other hand, often feels like the characters have become products rather than people. Scenes feel very overly polished, moments feel staged, and the show frequently drifts into something that almost resembles lifestyle advertising rather than storytelling. One moment that perfectly captures this is when Joanne casually drinks a cup of Dunkin' coffee with the logo perfectly facing the camera. Her skin glows like she's on a skincare commercial. The shot lingers just long enough to make you realize you basically watch an advertisement. Now look, television shows need product placement. That's just the reality of modern television production. They need money to function. But here it feels so obvious and so constant that it breaks the immersion. Instead of feeling like you're watching two people navigating a complicated relationship, it feels like you're watching influencers living a curated Instagram life. Another major disappointment in Season 2 is the reduced presence of some of the best supporting characters. One of the standout performances in first season came from Tova Felcher as Noah's mother. She brought warmth, humor, and sharp emotional edge to the series. Her relationship with Noah added depth to the show's exploration of faith, family, expectations, and cultural identity. But in Season 2, she's barely there. In fact, several of the characters who help ground the show in reality feel like they've been pushed to the sidelines. The supporting cast, which includes performers like Justine Lupe and Timothy Simons, had interesting subplots and quirky personalities in Season 1. This time around, many of them feel reduced to reaction characters, existing mainly to comment on Joanne's increasingly chaotic behavior or to move the plot forward. And even though Timothy Simons and Jackie Towan, who play Sasha and Esther respectively, are given bigger roles in this, there's no depth or interesting aspects to their characters. It's a real shame, as the supporting cast are incredibly talented. But the biggest problem, though, from Season 2 lies at the heart of the show: the relationship between Joanne and Noah. In Season 1, the relationship worked because there was genuine tension. There were cultural differences, there were questions about faith, there were moments where both characters had to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves. It was messy, but it was meaningful. In Season 2, however, the tension is replaced by constant bickering. Joanne and Noah argue constantly, but these arguments rarely lead to emotional growth or payoff. Instead, the conflicts often feel repetitive and shallow. They no longer feel like a couple trying to understand each other. They feel like two people stuck in the loop of petty disagreements. For a romantic comedy built entirely around the idea of investing in a relationship, that's a huge problem. Now let's talk Kristen Bell. Bell is usually fantastic at playing chaotic but lovable characters. That balance is something she mastered years ago in shows like The Good Place. In Season 1 of Nobody Wants This, though, she nailed it again. Joanne was messy, sarcastic, and sometimes selfish, but she was also charming and deeply human. Season 2, though, pushes this chaos much further. Instead of feeling relatable, Joanne often comes across as exhausting. She complains constantly. She reacts dramatically to every small conflict. She becomes overly sensitive to everything Noah does. At times, the performance feels almost performative, like the character is aware she's being watched. You start to wonder whether this was an intentional creative choice. Is the show trying to comment on modern relationships that are filtered, curated, and performed for an audience? If that is the case, it would actually be quite clever. But unfortunately, it never feels intentional enough to work as satire. Now, the same problem exists with Noah. In the first season, Noah was genuinely interesting. He was a rabbi trying to balance his faith with modern dating life. He was thoughtful, conflicted, and often quietly funny. But in Season 2, he becomes strangely rigid. He spends much of the season trying to be the good guy who helps everyone. But this constant moral superiority starts to feel irritating rather than admirable. At times he feels judgmental, stubborn, and unwilling to adapt. And when both leads start feeling frustrating rather than sympathetic, it becomes very difficult for an audience to stay emotionally invested. The supporting storylines also feel far weaker this time around. Joanne's sister, Morgan, suddenly finds herself in a potential marriage storyline with Dr. Andy, a character who's barely been introduced. We're suddenly supposed to believe that this might be the love of her life, but because the relationship hasn't been developed properly, it feels rushed and unearned. which I get is supposed to be the idea, but still there's no emotional depth to these characters, whereas Morgan and Joanne have a major fight that mirrors conflicts we've already seen before. For me, in many ways, it feels like the show is recycling ideas rather than developing new ones. Probably the show's best highlights involve the characters of Stephanie Pharisee, who plays Lynn Williams, Joanne's mother, and Michael Hitchcock, who plays Henry Williams, Joanne's father. These two are absolutely hilarious in every scene given to them. Season 2 also has some brief cameos from the likes of Seth Rogen, playing Rabbi Neil, a reformed rabbi, and of course Adam Brody's real-life wife, Leighton Meester, Joanne's former middle school friend, who's now a mom influencer on Instagram. And then let's of course get to the ending of Season 2. Without spoiling too much, the show essentially repeats the exact same emotional beat that closed off the first season. I literally thought Joanne and Noah were going to separate permanently, creating that cliffhanger so that you'd want to tune into Season 3 to see if they can get back together. Instead, once again they separate, realize they can't live without each other, start to run purposely back to the destination where they think the other might be, and suddenly find each other, standing across, creating another dramatic and purposeful moment. But haven't we seen this before? It completely felt like deja vu. When the show repeats its own ending instead of evolving the story, it creates a sense that the writers don't know where to take the characters next. And unfortunately, that's exactly how Season 2 feels. Watching this season, I kept thinking about how perfectly the first season worked as a standalone story. It had a beginning, it had emotional stakes, and it had a satisfying conclusion. But of course, as is the trend, let's keep trying to make some more money. Let's not leave it to lie. Season 2 feels like it exists simply because the first season was successful. There are still funny moments here and there, don't get me wrong, and the cast of course is talented, but the magic that made the show so special just isn't there anymore. Season 1 of Nobody Wants This brought something new to the romantic comedy genre. A genre that had been dormant for some years, gone with the famous rom-coms, and this show almost breathed new life into this. It explored complicated relationships between faith and modern love. It had warmth, humor, and genuine emotional chemistry. Season 2 unfortunately feels like the show is going through the motions. The characters feel less real, the conflicts feel repetitive, the emotional core of the story has largely disappeared, and by the end of the season you're left wondering what the story was even left to tell. Season 3 has already been confirmed for 2026, but after watching this season it's hard to feel excited about where the story might go next. At this point I really don't care what happens with Joanne and Noah next, because at this point it feels that the show has already said everything it needed to say. Nobody Wants This, Season 2, gets a 4 out of 10. So what did you think of Nobody Wants This? Please let me know down in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more deep dive reviews.